From the Radio Cafe and the Quivira Coalition, you're listening to Down to Earth, the Planet to Plate podcast. I'm your host, Mary Charlotte Domandi. And this week is the week of the Regenerate Conference, which is here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I am so excited to be going. And today we're going to be talking to one of the folks who will be presenting there, an entrepreneur, Shepherdess. We'll hear from her right after these quick announcements. This program is sponsored by the Greenhorns. Listeners to Down to Earth might enjoy the newly released 6th edition of the New Farmer's Almanac, a literary miscellany written by and for working agrarians. This year's volume is titled Adjustments and Accommodations, and it's full of essays, poetry, and images that explore how people are facing challenges and uncertainties on the land. Learn more and order your copy at greenhorns.org. This program is sponsored by the Agrarian Trust. Agrarian Trust is charting a new path forward for the land trust movement. They're advancing an innovative and robust model of land ownership in which agrarianism, social and environmental justice, community well-being, and the earth itself are all seen as fundamentally intertwined. They're doing this by helping regenerative farmers and ranchers to secure long-term, affordable leases. That helps to strengthen local food systems and to transform community relationships to the land across the country. Visit agrariantrust.org to learn more. So we're talking today to Cole Bush. She's founder of Shepherdess Land and Livestock in Ojai, California, and founder of the Grazing School of the West. And she has something called a flerd. That's a combination of a flock and a herd, consisting of 600 to 700 sheep and goats, which she uses to do what's called prescriptive grazing. Now, prescriptive grazing is a natural and regenerative alternative to things like lawnmowers and weed whackers and other fossil fuel-based machines for removing vegetation from landscapes. And it's reviving the ancient profession of shepherding all over the country. Because goats are browsers and sheep are grazers, they eat different kinds of plants, and any given area can be customized based on what kind of forage needs to be thinned out. Because they're animals, they fertilize the ground and build soil and foster the process of restoration of ecosystems to a healthier and more resilient state. I asked Cole about the fire mitigation aspect of her work and how grazing and browsing animals help to prevent or lessen the intensity of fires.
Because we work in a fire ecology in Southern California, we have to understand what type of fire fuels we have to graze to reduce the devastation of wildfires. So working with fire ecologists, we determine what that forage needs to, in the case of a fire, slow the rate of fire and the intensity of the fire and the height of the fire. And in many cases, we're grazing in chaparral and brush ecologies. And the more space we're able to open up, we're able to help reduce what that fire intensity would look like. And in a lot of cases, it's not just the animals grazing and browsing, it's the animal impact of the animals pushing through the brush to create these pathways that slow down the rate of fire should there be a fire. In other cases, the animals will browse and graze understory of trees, reducing the fire ladder. So if there was a fire, it would slow down jumping up into the trees. So it's really a combo punch of moving the animals through that brush, as well as lifting the understory of trees, and also reducing with the sheep primarily, who are grazers, and the goats are browsers. The grazers really like the grasslands, and the sheep do a really great job at grazing those flashy fuels, which are generally invasive annual grasses.
Well, that's another thing I wanted to ask you about. I mean, I'm here in New Mexico, and we've got these fire-adapted landscapes, but because they've grown out of balance for a number of reasons, including fire suppression over many decades, we can get these catastrophic fires. What is out of balance where you are in California? I mean, is it a fire-adapted landscape? What did it look like? What does it look like now in the places where you're bringing your animals?
Here in California, especially Southern California, because of the amount of development, because of the amount of disruption and disturbed landscapes, we're finding the encroachment of these fire fuels, these ecologies that really are not adapted to fire, which our native ecologies co-evolved with fire. We have a lot of disturbed landscapes. What we want, we really try to manage for what we want, are the native perennial grasses that once were all over the grasslands of California. We want biodiversity of grasses and forbs and trees and the succession of chaparral that actually a healthy chaparral stand can be a fire-resistant or fire-ready ecology. And so what we are doing with prescriptive grazing approaches is really trying to understand what is the best state of being for this ecology and how can we kind of move the dial in succession of what grows on that particular landscape. And we're trying to manage that. We are changing and adapting our management year after year as we observe what is the healthiest or most functional state of any given ecology.
Now, the people who are hiring you, is what you just said, is that their goal as well? Like what kind of clients do you have for this work?
Many of our clients are really looking to reduce the risks and liabilities and devastation around wildfire, right? Often we come into a job and the client is eager to reduce as much of that flashy fuel stand as possible. But with our prescription, we really do make sure that we're keeping in mind what makes a healthy ecology in our context. And so in some cases, as an alternative to mechanical machines or chemicals that will remove all vegetation, we're actually looking at reducing vegetation, but in such a way that it's protecting our soils. We always are looking at trying to leave litter on the ground instead of creating bare landscapes. And that's something we have to educate our clients, is that we're actually not trying to remove everything and have bare earth for fuel breaks. But what we're trying to do is support vegetation, support the ecology to be more resilient to fire.
What kind of folks hire you? I mean, are these government contracts? Are they private landowners?
Well, the really cool thing is that prescribed grazing is a rapidly growing and high demand approach for fire fuels reduction. It's pretty awesome to see that more and more both private landowners and public agencies and organizations and foundations that manage large landscapes are looking to us to rapidly treat as many acres as possible in the height of fire season. It's not just government agencies, cities, or counties that are hiring us, but increased awareness and education with private landowners, especially in our community. We're seeing that it doesn't matter if there are property lines. One landowner themselves might recognize that if their neighbors also graze, then there's going to be an increased benefit for their goals of protecting the infrastructure, the built environment in our towns and suburbs and cities.
So you've got neighbors who are coming together and saying, hey, let's hire these guys together?
Yeah, the coolest thing, I think, in the Ojai Valley where we operate, we have partnered with the Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council to recognize that if we can graze more contiguous acres around the valley, we're increasing the fire safety, fire readiness of our community. And so the approach with the community-supported grazing program is to actually bring together private and public land owners and managers to all together stitch together these acres and work together to allow for our animals to not just graze one property at a time, but to graze a whole swath of our valley in a continuous movement. What we do is we really are trying to keep animals off of trucks. What we love to do is shepherd. We love to move our animals on foot with our dogs, with each other, and essentially open gates from one property to another and stay on our feet as long as possible. And the community supported grazing program is proving to be really successful in creating these community partnerships for increased fire hazard reduction, but also to enhance the ecologies that do need disruption or do need disturbance in a positive way in interacting with our landscapes instead of letting them go. For centuries, our landscapes have been tended by the indigenous folks who had been here for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years. So we have to engage with our landscapes. And that is exactly what we're doing, is trying to tend every year, every season, some of these wildland-urban interfaces where, quite frankly, folks with weed whippers, mowers, big machines can't go.
Right, because the land, it's, what is it, too rocky or steep or things like that?
Exactly. Big boulders, rocky, steep canyons, and even cliff sides. Our animals are able to go in places that we can't even go. So I think it's much more safe to have these four-legged friends than folks on the ground with two legs trying to scramble up these hillsides. But it's, yes, very steep, very rocky, lots of boulders, tons of brush. In some places, we have a lot of poison oak, and quite frankly, a lot of people just can't or will not go into that stuff because of what it does.
Right, right. So are you seeing the results in terms of fire impact?
There are examples all over California that have been documented and are increasingly documented where when there is a fire after there has been a grazing treatment, the fire essentially stops or slows down tremendously. And for the firefighters who have to fight these fires, it makes their job so much more efficient and safe when that grazing has occurred. And it's pretty awesome to have that documentation. We're seeing more and more fire agencies looking to prescribed grazing as a increased use tool because they are seeing it work.
I mean, it's got to have amazing climate impact too, because you're not using fossil fuels by running machines, and you're using animals that are fertilizing the soil with their excrement. I mean, it seems like it's such a win-win.
Yes, absolutely. It's an alternative to fossil fuel dependent machines. Two-stroke machines, weed whippers, are known to spit out more emissions than pretty much any other type of machine that's out there. Sometimes in the year, all you can hear in our neighborhoods are weed whippers. If you're using sheep and goats, you're reducing a lot of that noise pollution, but we are not continuously spitting out that CO2 that is a tremendous contributor to a lot of the greenhouse gases that we are trying to reduce.
For us observing California, for people like me, living in New Mexico, observing California, where you see these destructive wildfires and then these terrible floods, what's the relationship between those two things? And do you feel like grazing, which helps create healthier soil, has a role to play in mitigating the flood as well as the fire situation?
Absolutely. What I've learned after now experiencing having my home base be on a land base that was greatly impacted by a very large fire called the Thomas Fire in 2018 in the Ojai Valley. Grazing on this post-fire impacted landscape, seeing what type of vegetation came after that fire. We have, helping to restore that landscape, we've recognized that if we're able to start moving the invasive species population to a more perennial or a more resilient population of forages, we are helping to do the very things that mitigate floods: deeper root systems, diversity of succession of plants from our grasses and forbs and trees. We're impacted again, another natural disaster earlier this year from tremendous floods, and it was quite devastating. But now, after experiencing the flooding, I feel like our work, we're looking at what our impacts are in improving some of the areas that were most devastated by the floods. And a lot of that is helping to bring root systems into that soil to help with erosion issues that have been, wildly an issue on our hillsides and the sides of our creeks, all of these things. It takes time for these ecologies to change. Mother Earth has a different cadence in how she works, and we are learning how to work with her and her time. And I know that it will take seasons for us, years for us, generations for us to see what our impacts are. But if our focus is on what we want, not what we don't want, what we want is a healthy, biodiverse, resilient landscape that inherently can handle these types of impacts or reduce the impacts of these natural disasters. That's what we're trying to go for, is doing our best to support an ecology in balance. I believe will help reduce the impacts of these wildfires and floods and erosion and all of these things. I'm encouraged to see, just on a small land base that we manage, small little nudges towards improvement.
You're listening to Down to Earth. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Quivira Coalition is hosting a workshop at Weaver Ranch in Causey, New Mexico on November 11th to learn about efforts to bring prairie life back to abandoned fields affected by the Dust Bowl. They will discuss innovative organic amendment applications such as compost, biochar, and bale grazing. New Mexico State University's Dr. Rajan Gimir will discuss his research related to soil health and organic amendments. Amy Larson will talk about Quivira's case studies of amendments on rangelands, and attendees will participate in hands-on field monitoring for rangeland soils. The event is free. You can register at quiviracoalition.org/events/Weaver-Ranch, or just go to quiviracoalition.org/events and you will find it there. And now back to our program. So you're a first-generation agrarian. How did you choose this career, and how did you learn the skills and knowledge that you needed?
Well, I have had an academic background in environmental studies and agroecology, which really helped me set the foundation for understanding a lot of the ecosystem processes and how we can grow food in such a way that is in harmony with our environment. But I would say that it was actually learning by doing and mentorship that helped me to really see what my true path is as this first generation agrarian. And I've been very lucky to have mentors who come from multi-generations of the culture of sheep herding in the West through a Basque American family in the Central Valley. And it was really through the passage of knowledge and wisdom through these multi-generational shepherds that helped me to learn by doing. And I think that that's one of the things that we have as a challenge for first-generation agrarians is the importance of that knowledge and wisdom being passed and the opportunities and pathways for folks to learn by doing. And that's essentially what I am the most excited about in my work, is not just doing fantastic things on the land with animals, but through my business, being able to create jobs and opportunities for folks to get into this work. Because for me, it wasn't a direct line from being a Southern California, raised on the beaches, to shepherding in hillsides. It was a circuitous path, and I would say that it was my search for understanding how I can live my life and do work that's meaningful and impactful that helped me to get the skills and the education that I needed to do this work as an entrepreneur and as an educator. Holistic management as a practice also really set me up for success in understanding the importance of learning all of the parts and pieces that allow us to see a landscape, observe, learn what our impacts are by learning from the natural environment and the systems and processes that create equilibrium in the environment.
You do so many different things. I mean, not only the prescribed grazing, but also, as you were saying, teaching and training and cultivating new businesses and entrepreneurship. And I'd love to hear what that looks like. It seems like there's a great demand for the kind of work you do, and training people. It's like no matter how many people you train, there's work for them. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, we are operating an hour and 20 minutes north of Los Angeles, the most populated city in the West. And so many people, I think, since COVID are really looking at how they want to spend all of their hours. You know, what work really helps to create change. And I'm seeing such an influx of people who come from non-traditional agricultural backgrounds interested in our work. Our founding shepherd, Dylan Boken, was one of those city kids. You know, he grew up in the city and he studied agroecology and environmental studies as well. But at some point after college, he fell in love with agriculture and livestock and wanted to be able to get the experience to start his own operation in livestock. I actually met him in the city, and he told me of his dream of raising cattle for supporting a healthy food shed and raising a high quality, nutritious protein in cattle. And I said, man, that's going to be really hard to do with land access and how many acres it's going to take you to raise enough beef cattle to feed, a community. Have you ever thought of small ruminants?
Now you're talking goats and sheep.
Right. Small ruminants, goats and sheep. I invited Dylan up to see what we got going on, and he was able to jump in and start learning by doing. 3 years later, Dylan is now running and operating a growing, burgeoning business called Boakhouse Hearth and Husbandry, and he is under and with Shepherdess is raising lambs for local consumption, and his lamb is now being served in several of our local restaurants and selling direct to consumer. And it is a dream come true of his to start his business so close to home, but also a dream of mine to be able to create something where someone who would have a lot of limitations getting into this work now has the ability. And we're really excited about this model of creating business guilds, sharing resources, be it labor, land, equipment, even animals. I'm really excited to see how this model can continue to grow into other things, not just in food, but also in fiber.
So there's fiber in terms of sheep shearing. Then there's also leather hides. There's all kinds of businesses that can come out from that core.
Exactly. I mean, animals, livestock are so incredible. They don't just do cool, great, awesome, impactful things in this prescriptive grazing approach. They have all of these other wonderful products that we need. Food, you have your protein, you have milk and cheese, you have the wool that we can shear and process and make into things. It's very, very hard because of our limitations with processing to produce wool at scale. But I think there's more and more interest from the consumer to be more conscious about what we wear, what we use, what we eat. And as that conscious consumerism increases, the demand for our work also increases. And like you mentioned, yes, hides, leather, sheepskins, all of these things are things that humans, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for animals and wasn't for leather. And I think people are kind of going back to that core and have an attraction to these natural byproducts of what we do.
I think something that's so interesting about this too is that it feels like the way that you're growing businesses in itself has a kind of organic and regenerative quality to it. Do you see it that way?
Well, I haven't thought of this particular idea of regeneration. I kind of like this idea of how as we grow, we are organically growing other businesses, other meaningful vocations every year with our expansion and our optimization with what we're doing. I like to think that we're not just regenerating, but generating, creating new models that are adapted to our current context and society and our lands. I love that, the regenerating and generating new, to me, is probably one of the most exciting things outside of our lambing and kidding season, where we're creating more and more sheep and goats to be grazing for good. And with every new herd of animals or flerd of animals that we have, we need new shepherds. And if we have new shepherds, then we have the opportunity to support that generation of new businesses. And I'm really excited about kind of thinking about that more with that prompt of question.
Do you find that people really are wanting to come into this world? It's hard work, and yet it seems to be attracting a lot of people, to this work of shepherding.
It's one of the most rewarding things I've experienced in working hard outside, engaging with my natural environment alongside others, alongside my dog, alongside these incredible animals. And I have to admit, I think we make it look pretty bucolic and beautiful in how we communicate through media in the world. But I think people see how lit up each one of us is in our work. And I've actually been pretty surprised about how many people are completely game to throw down. There's so many inquiries that we have of people just wanting to come and see and volunteer in what we do. And that has really perpetuated my longtime goal of the Grazing School of the West providing opportunities for folks to get trained. We just recently hosted our first Shepherd's Boot Camp at our home ranch, Oak Heritage Ranch in Ojai. And within a week, we had over 70 inquiries and applications for folks who wanted to sign up for this boot camp. And it was outstanding to see not just how many people were interested, but the diversity of people, of folks who came from the city. We had two brothers who were able to come from Compton, and then we had a wonderful woman who came out from Alberta, Canada, and another woman who came out from Hawaii. and all over California and different parts of the country. In total, we were able to have about 20 to 24 people during that time. But I am so excited to be able to host our next boot camp because the demand is high for folks to even just get a taste. It's not for everybody, but shepherding can be the gateway for people to see how many hats need to be worn to support these meaningful and impactful and solution-creating businesses and livelihoods. I think the boot camp was an opportunity for folks to see that it's not just the work on the ground, but it's everything around building a viable business to make our good work happen. And so if somebody had, skill sets in documentary or photography, or even, one of our shepherds who's also from LA, his side gig is he's a coder, and he comes and is living with the animals 4 days a week and then goes back to LA and he codes for a part of his living. He's also started his own shearing business, which is also burgeoning, and that's another part of our guild. Noe and Dylan, who are on that team, are examples of folks who have come into shepherding to prescribe grazing as their job, but they've been able to see that there's so many other jobs that can be created from just this work.
Another project you're involved with is teaching shepherding to incarcerated people. Tell us about that.
This past season, we were able to partner with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department to start a pilot program with prescribed grazing for fire fuel reduction at their second largest detention center in Santa Clarita in Los Angeles County. The detention center sits on a defunct 2,600 acre ranch. And quite frankly, a lot of the facilities that these incarcerated folks live in are tucked away in beautiful canyons on this old ranch. But if there was a fire, it would be tremendously difficult to move thousands and thousands of incarcerated people out. So the Sheriff's Department has been really looking at how they can increase the fire safety and the fire readiness of their facilities. And with partnering with a couple amazing individuals from the department who sought us out, we were able to pilot grazing over 80 acres in a short amount of time around the facility. Part of the goal is to create an internal shepherd training program for incarcerated folks to learn the work of a prescribed grazer with an eventual program that provides accreditation and job placement after incarceration. And so we were able to pilot a project that was several weeks long where these incarcerated guys would come on out and work with us and work with the shepherds for hours on end to learn, the day in the life of a shepherd, building fence, water systems, tending to animals, even herding animals down the main drag of the detention center. And we're really excited to expand upon the program because of the tremendous feedback we not only got from those individuals, but also staff. And I have to say, it's probably been one of the most rewarding projects that I've ever been able to be a part of. Our aspiration is to create a model for other detention centers around the state and hopefully the West, and maybe even encourage around the country, teaching folks this green job ecosystem service of shepherding and tending to the land with the ability to get jobs after incarceration. And there's nothing more healing than the hard work, but also working on the land with animals.
Yeah, I was going to say, it must affect those guys personally. How did you see them take to it? How did you see them change? Like, what did staff say about them?
I think my shepherds can attest to changes over time with each individual who participated in the pilot project. it's very physically demanding work. And often these individuals, in my understanding, have limited time to use their bodies, have limited time to be outdoors and see the beautiful things that we get to see on the daily basis. You know, getting to know the birds that live in the area, getting to see the changes of quality of sun, you know, at different times of season or year. And I think there was a healing component for each one of these individuals who got to be outside and work with their bodies and got to see those little things that a shepherd gets to see that is so rewarding. One individual had very high blood pressure and was really working on improving his health, and what he was told is that what he needed was more exercise, and this work was able to give him that opportunity. And I would say each one of those individuals increased their strength and their endurance, and, you know, in general, that physicality and being able to have that exercise and being outside and being in our natural environs does improve our mental health. By the end of our project, it was really quite joyful for us to be spending time together as peers in the experience and to have reflection of funny things that may have happened with the animals or doing the work. Those 3-4 days a week for them was clear that was their favorite times of the week. And in fact, one of the trainees, he is being released in January, and he's already inquired about a job. And I think that's testament to what his experience was while training with us and the shepherds and the animals. And then that also includes the staff. We had 2 fantastic deputies working with us every day that the guys came out, and we all did the same work together. And for that moment in time, everybody was equal because we were all tending to those animals.
And it's so hard for folks to get jobs when they get out of prison, especially if they're convicted felons. This is a real pathway, so it makes an impact on so many different levels.
It sure does. One of the biggest opportunities in creating jobs after incarceration through this work is that there are many areas that are actually non-populated that require a shepherd to be out there with the animals and are responsible with the animals and live on site. And there are places in the county of Los Angeles where this type of work is needed. And for many of these incarcerated folks, recidivism is certainly a huge concern of folks getting stuck in that cycle of going back to communities that spit them right back into incarceration. And housing is a tremendous challenge in Los Angeles. And I think there's opportunity to develop what it means to be somebody with a record, being able to get a job doing something that is supporting the safety of our communities and stewarding our land and working with animals and keeping folks out of incarceration.
Well, I look forward to hearing more about that as it develops. It sounds like an incredibly promising program. So we've talked about so many things, prescribed grazing and the animals and the business and the people and the program like the incarceration program. You're and training and teaching. You're doing so much. What are your biggest challenges in this work?
What are my biggest challenges in this work? My biggest challenges are all of the opportunities, and there's so many of them, and there's so many doors to be opened that it's hard to know exactly which ones to open and when. The demand is increasing for our work, but there are not enough skilled and experienced shepherds to perform this work. There are not enough grazing outfits to do all of this work. There needs to be increased public awareness. Like, I think I kind of joke around, like, we have Smokey the Bear. We need billboards down the I-5 in California that have sheep and goats on them. And instead of saying, we're fighting fires, we're preventing fires by supporting healthy ecologies. Like, that education and awareness needs to happen. We need more policy and more political support to make way for this to happen. We need more training. We need our clients to understand the value of our work, and that in some instances we will cost more money than weed whippers. But it's not just the cost of reducing the vegetation for fire fuels mitigation. It is supporting a healthy landscape. It is creating jobs that are contributing to the change. We are mitigating the risk and liability. If there was a fire, so much more money is going to be spent than what it would take for prescribed grazing. I think there needs to be subsidies for prescribed grazing in more communities where the finances are just not there to hire prescribed grazers. And I think that's a big challenge. With the community-supported grazing program, one of the foundational visions and mottos of the program is grazing for all, meaning the accessibility, the financial ability for folks to hire prescribed grazing service providers year after year after year. And in some cases, 2 treatments are needed. And quite frankly, people are not used to spending more money to manage landscapes. And that awareness is needing to increase. And I think that's a big challenge, but it's a huge opportunity, because I think the more and more successful projects we perform, the more and more awesome jobs we can create, the more wonderful and viable and successful businesses we can be a part of as a community, as an alliance of folks in this work. We are answering to that challenge, and we are creating that public awareness, because I think it's exciting and it's good for the earth and good for society in supporting a healthy local economy as much as we're supporting a healthy local ecology.
What will you be talking about at the Regenerate conference?
Well, in the spirit of holistic approaches and the wiliness of grazing and browsing animals, I will be touching on a lot of lessons learned in this work, not just the actual practicalities of bringing animals in wild places on the urban periphery or in small towns, but what the impacts are on individuals that help to create organizations that do good work and are creating change. And I look forward to sharing what I've learned and learning what all of the other participants are going to share, because one of my favorite things about Regenerate is the amount of inspiration, the amount of encouragement, and the amount of wonderful ideas that I can bring back to our work. I'm excited to highlight a little bit of my story as a non-traditional modern-day shepherd in Southern California, and to encourage folks who've kind of lost faith that we will be able to have a workforce that can support what we're doing on the ground. I fully believe we have an opportunity to support a next generation of land stewards, ecological doctors as grazers. And I am excited to share what I've learned.
Cole Bush, thank you so much for being with us on Down to Earth.
Thank you so much. It's been awesome to share with you what we're doing down here in SoCal.
For more information about Cole Bush's work, you can go to shepherdesslandl.co. And you can also go to brittanycolebush.co. And you can also find those links in our show notes. And one more thing before we go. Quivira Coalition's new agrarian program opens applications for 2024 apprentices from November 1st through December 15th. This 8-month full-time apprenticeship program helps beginning agrarians gain mentorship and work experience in regenerative ranching and farming at mentor operations in New Mexico, Colorado, and Montana. For more information, visit our website at quiviracoalition.org/newagrarian and visit Quivira's events tab to register for the next NAP 101 call, where we describe our participating mentor sites in detail and answer questions from prospective apprentices. Hope to see you there. Quivira is spelled Quivira. Once again, quiviracoalition.org/newagrarian. You've been listening to Down to Earth. We would love it if you would support this program, which you can do by going to patreon.com/down-to-earth planet to plate, where you can sign up for as little as $3. Patreon is Patreon. And also, please rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. The Quivira Coalition is a not-for-profit and a community network of ranchers, farmers, conservationists, scientists, educators, and many others dedicated to regenerative practices that produce healthy food, support meaningful livelihoods, sustain biodiversity, and remedy the impacts of climate change. To learn more about Quivira and how you can support their work, visit quiviracoalition.org, Quivira. And finally, this show is a production with the Radio Cafe. You can check out radiocafe.org to hear back episodes of this show and also find all kinds of other shows on a wide variety of topics as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.